I hope you guys had coffee because I know it's siesta time and we are going to talk about a very important topic today. We've heard from many of the speakers this morning about people and the human side of transformations. And today we are going to discuss a bit about how do we bring people on board. And you've probably seen these numbers, 70% of transformations fail. And very often, it is not that the solutions aren't good enough, that the technology isn't well implemented. Very often, it is just that we haven't planned well enough for the change that the technology is bringing into the organization. And companies are really investing a lot in technology because technology is progress. And this data I got from Gartner, 4.6 trillion. That's the projected spending for this year. And if you do the math, there is a very big cost in poorly managed change. But why do we resist change? What do you think? Too traditional. Yeah, we heard about that in Lean's presentation. I found this guy some years ago. His name is Rick Morer. He's an organizational change management expert focused on digital transformations. He's American as well. And he says that people resist change for 3 reasons. They don't get it, they don't like it, and they don't like you. Who has experienced any of this in your projects? A lot of hands, yes. Yeah, at this point, I want to also tell you a very personal story. This was around 15 years ago. I was working at a big company. I still didn't have CERT-PLM, and I was offered a promotion. I was offered the opportunity to work as a PLM director. And I was very excited. I was very young, very hungry, and I remember going there. And first of all, I was talking to my boss, and he was showing me the solution. And it was a very good solution. Like the technical side, it was really perfect. It was very impressive. And he was explaining me that they wanted to enable the service side of the business, capitalize on the life cycle value of the products. And he was very excited. The team was really excited. We had a lot of expensive consultants in the team. And when I went out there and I was talking to users, they didn't really get it. They thought it was just a system. They had to work with a different system. They had to change the way they used to work, and they didn't really understand the why. Then I was talking to management, and they were telling me, hey, Helena, you have a lot of experience in this PLM stuff. What happens with this system? Is it faulty? Why is it not working? Then people also didn't like it, because as much as I thought it was a good solution, the systems are still very difficult to use. And when people went into the system, they saw a very difficult to use user interface with a lot of duplicated buttons. And yeah, the system was not easy to use. And finally, they didn't like me. I was an outsider. I didn't know their business, and they were not trusting me, and they were resisting me. After 2 years there, I was able to turn the tables with the team, and we were able to grow the user base by 3, triplicate the user base, and also get a lot of active users. We built a movement, and guess what? We didn't spend any money on technical things or technical developments. We spent time with people and time with people. And that was a seed for my company, CERT-PLM. We focus on change, and we learned the lesson that this morning, I think Hans from Citiva, he was also having this quote in his presentation, that technology is easy, but people is hard. We are difficult. And we really need to take this as a project as well, because if we really want to get the change through, we need to plan from it from day one. And after working with some of the best companies in the world, we have been able to put together a framework which starts really with thinking about the why. Why are we doing this? And very often when I talk to companies and they explain me their vision, I hear a lot of fluff, a lot of efficiency and very high-level words. And at the end of the day, it needs to be something really concrete, something that people can visualize, something that you can touch with your hands. Like today in the morning, Lynn was explaining about digital product passport. That's a good one. Okay. At the end of this year, we are going to be able to create digital passports with one click. That's a good one. I think the guy from Citiva, he also had a very good one about validating the products in 2 days. Something concrete. Then looking at where are your people? Because it's not the same being in a very small company than being in a big company, one industry or the other. So really finding out where are your people and what's the gap. And then creating a plan. How do we get this change through? Then this is a project of itself. Many people, when they come to us, they come too late. They already have the system, they have already configured everything, and then they say, okay, now we need help. And it's too late. This is something that you need to start with this, and you need to manage it from the beginning as a project of itself. And then, of course, communicating and really making people feel that they are part of it. And, of course, working on the user experience. I know that the systems are not super flexible. We cannot do everything, but there is really a lot that we can do. So, yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. And now Maria will do a live assessment with you guys.
I'll grab the... Perfect. So now we're going to move on to the interactive part of the presentation. So I really hope you're all not sick and tired of Mentimeter, because I brought it back. So if I go on to the next slide here, if you wouldn't mind grabbing your phones and scanning our QR code. This is going to be very interactive, and we're also going to get to know each other a little bit better. So I'll just give you a second to scan that. I can see a few more people scanning, so I'll give you one more second. Perfect. Let's move on. So what are we going to do now? So Helena has given us an overview of our change framework, our 9-step approach that puts people at the center of change. What we are going to do is we are going to give you a quick and fast version of what we call our change readiness assessment. So when we begin working with new customers, we analyze where they are in their transformation based on this 9-step framework and evaluate the areas in which they need to improve and the areas that they're already doing a really good job in. So what we are going to do now is, I can see some of you already doing it. If you don't mind just putting in your location. I know most of us are from Europe, and the map is very small for Europe, so a rough guide is perfect. Amazing. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So let's set the scene a little bit. What I want you to do now is I would like you to reflect on the most recent digital transformation that your organization has undergone, or alternatively, think back to a previous one that has already been completed. And the reason I want you to have this in mind is we are going to assess where you are in either a current or past digital transformation to assess how well you're currently doing or how well you did previously. And we're going to be using our 9-step framework so that you can kind of get an idea of our people-centric approach to change. First of all, if you wouldn't mind putting in which industry you represent, and we can get an idea of kind of who we have in the audience. Nice. It's always good when we have a diverse mix. Perfect. So apart from the fact I wanted to get to know you all a bit better, the reason I wanted you to put in your industry here is essentially to show that our methodology to change is applicable to all industries. Essentially, when you have a digital transformation, it doesn't matter what industry you are implementing it in. If people are involved, then this methodology will put them at the center and help ensure success. Gosh, so many. Amazing. Okay, let's move on. So now we're moving on to kind of the first part, the narrative side of the of change readiness. So as Helena briefly mentioned, having a clearly defined narrative is extremely important when implementing a new system or any digital transformation. And the reason for this is, as we all know, people like to talk. And people will talk about things if it's going amazing, and they'll probably talk even more if it's not going great. So having a clearly defined narrative and kind of message surrounding the digital transformation will enable you to kind of control the way in which people talk about the transformation, and this will help reduce user resistance and get more people on board. So if we have a look at the screen here, when we ask the question, was the end goal of your digital transformation clearly defined, we can see that pretty much the vast majority is in somewhat defined. From this, we could immediately see that, okay, a clear narrative and message wasn't put into place during this transformation. So I would imagine that many of you probably experienced conflicting messages and ideas from people when you spoke about the transformation. You would probably speak about it in slightly different ways. The end goal that you had in mind probably differed to what somebody else's end goal was. And having this clear narrative enables you to all speak the same language. So another narrative question here, how aware were you of your organization's strategic objectives during the transformation? Okay, interesting. This is quite a mix. So again, everyone seems to be kind of sat in the middle. We have some people who are very aware, which is great. Some people who are somewhat aware, and some people who are not aware at all. So what is this telling us? This is essentially telling us that, again, if you don't have a clearly defined message surrounding your transformation, how are people able to link that back to your overall strategic objectives? So what you're trying to do here is bridge this gap so everybody's on the same page. Next, how well was the digital transformation aligned with the organization's strategic objectives? Great. So here, again, it seems we're all perfectly kind of split between all of these answers. So we have some organizations who did an amazing job at this and some who didn't do a good job at all. So again, the importance of having, again, as we mentioned, this clearly defined message surrounding a transformation will ensure that everybody is aware of how it links to the overall objectives of the organization. Next question we have is, did your organization have a defined training plan for end users during the digital transformation? I can see a lot of people nodding their heads and then clicking on no. So I'm sure we all understand the importance of having clearly defined training plans for end users. Because as a lot of people have mentioned here, it doesn't matter how amazing a system is. If people don't understand how to use it, I mean, the system's essentially pointless. So what we always strive for is to have, specific learning paths for different roles within the system so that people feel as if their needs are being met and they understand how to do their job. Okay, was there a designated team responsible for managing and governing changes and requirements for the transformation? Again, this is really interesting because we are very much split between all three. So I think we all need to identify who said yes and who said no and bring us all together. And we can all chat after this. But yes, again, when it comes to governance, this is super important during digital transformations because this is essentially your blueprint for ensuring that the objectives are met and that your return on investment is good and that also your users are happy and also understand the system. If you don't have a governance framework in place, you're essentially running blind. Anything could happen, which we want to avoid and ensure that there aren't too many surprises along the way. So next we have, did your organization establish a community of practice to support the transformation initiative? Again, we're seeing very similar results here. I imagine the people who said that there was a governance framework in place also said that they had a community of practice because these two normally go hand in hand. Essentially, your community of practice is implementing everything you've laid out in your governance, but also ensuring that everybody who's involved in the transformation feels seen and heard and feels like they have a place to share their needs, their pains, and their requirements going forward. Okay, so we're working our way around the framework. So was the purpose of the transformation communicated effectively throughout the organization? So you may have had a clear message, but was that communicated? Again, most people are saying partially communicated. So it seems that one thing that I think you've probably all noticed as we've gone through this is everybody seems to have these elements of a digital transformation in mind as they are going through it. However, they haven't always been expertly executed, which I think is one of the big things that we've seen here. But yes, as Helena also was saying, communication is so important because you want everybody who's a part of the transformation and involved and affected by it to feel that they are informed at every step and that they aren't just being left aside and told information at the very last minute. Okay, so did your organization have a centralized knowledge base to engage users and share documentation? Again, very split results, but this kind of leads on to, from our previous talk about kind of having a single source of truth and having a centralized knowledge base, which, as we all know, is amazing because, again, not only with documents, if you're having loads of siloed approaches and documents in different places and different versions, obviously having a centralized knowledge base will enable you to always be working with the most up-to-date information. But having a knowledge base also is important for other aspects, such as communication, such as training materials. Lots of the things we speak about here can all be implemented within this knowledge base and ensure that it reaches everybody who it should. Okay, next question. How effectively were your organization's business processes documented and mapped during the transformation? Not as many people said very well documented and mapped as I would have thought. But yeah, as we all know here, that when processes aren't correctly or even documented at all, then how can you expect your people to follow these processes that you have outlined to ensure that their job gets done the way it should, but also to help streamline efficiency? So it's very important to have these processes documented and mapped, because one thing that we find is that a lot of the key information is in a few people's heads, and that is passed around verbally. But ultimately, people aren't going to stay with you forever, and you need to make sure that these processes can be passed on. Okay, we're nearly at the end. So was feedback from end users and management solicited and acted upon regularly? So as we've heard in many of the talks today, user experience is a really big focus point when it comes to these systems. And as Helena was mentioning, it is hard to sometimes adapt these systems to make them as easy as we would like them to be. However, just getting that feedback from end users and seeing what their main pain points are and struggles are, and making them feel like they're heard and that their voices are going to affect change within the system and the organization is really important. And lastly, because I know we're running out of time, how well did your organization measure the success of the transformation? This one's a lot more aligned to not well documented or measured at all. And yeah, again, obviously you're spending all of this money on a new system, on whichever system it may be, a digital transformation. If you're not measuring the success of it, then how can you say that it has been a success? So here we're looking at making sure that the objectives we set out at the beginning and communicated during the narrative stage have actually been achieved. What do you perceive as the biggest challenge in successfully navigating digital transformations in your organizations? Change management people. Yeah, people in change management seem to be taking center stage. Communication, generation gap, people at the center. And that's essentially what we do at Share PLM. We notice that there is this lack of focus on people and on end users. And essentially what we do, our approach to change management is focusing on people and ensuring that their voices are heard, because essentially they're the ones who have to use the system, and they're the ones who are going to make a transformation a success or a failure. And this is the last question, I promise. So in general, which animal would you use to describe your organization's approach to change management? We have an elephant, a cheetah, or an owl. Essentially, the purpose of this question is to say, it doesn't really matter which animal you pick to describe your organization. If people aren't at the center of a change, it doesn't matter how fast and efficient you are, it doesn't matter how detail-oriented you are. The transformation is not going to be successful if people aren't at the center of your thoughts. And here, I just wanted to put this QR code here. If anyone was interested in taking our change readiness assessment, these were just a few of the questions from the complete assessment. You can take the assessment, and you will be provided with a comprehensive report that will break down each of these elements of our framework that we've just spoken about. And before we finished, I just wanted to leave you on this one quote that I think really encapsulates everything, not even just us, but lots of you have spoken about today, which is, it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. Thank you.